All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the first big lesson from that book that pretty much changed the game for how millions of people think about money. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And you know what's interesting? It all kicks off not with some complex financial theory, but with a really simple and really powerful personal story. So, it all kicks off with this one question. And it comes from a place of, that kind of sting you only really feel as a kid. We're talking about a 9-year-old Robert Kiyosaki way back in 1956. He gets left out by his buddies just because he's a poor kid. And man, that one moment of being excluded, it lit a fire in him. It sent him on this huge quest to understand, what do rich people know that he doesn't? And boom, that one question just lays it all bare. It shows this huge gap between the two big father figures in his life. You've got his real dad, his poor dad, who was super smart, highly educated, but his whole thing was study hard, get good grades, find a safe, secure job, the traditional path. But then on the other side, you have his best friend's dad, the rich dad. And this guy, he was an entrepreneur, playing a completely different ballgame.
Now, his first attempt at getting rich was, it was pretty wild, actually. He and his buddy Mike decide to literally make money by melting down lead tubes to create their own nickels. So his dad has to sit him down and gently explain, hey son, that's called counterfeiting, and it's illegal. But what his dad does next is so important. Instead of just shooting him down, he points him to someone who could actually guide that energy, his friend Mike's dad.
Okay, so this is where everything changes. When he finally gets to meet Rich Dad, he's not handed a book or sat down for a lecture. Instead, he gets this offer. A really weird offer, actually, but it ends up being the cornerstone of everything he learns about money. See, Rich Dad's whole deal was pretty straightforward. You don't learn about money by sitting in a classroom. Nah, you learn by doing, by getting your hands dirty. So if these boys really wanted to understand wealth, their education wasn't going to be about reading. It was going to be about working. And the job? It was absolutely mind-numbing. 3 hours every single Saturday, stuck in a stuffy store, dusting cans for just 10 cents an hour. That's 30 cents for the whole day? Yeah, that whole dream of learning the secrets of the rich, you just kind of evaporated. Instead, it felt like they were just cheap, exploited labor. All the excitement, totally gone. So after a month of this, he's had it. He's done. He feels totally used, and even worse, like he's been completely forgotten. I mean, Rich Dad hadn't even come by since that first day. The whole promise of being taught anything felt like a total scam. So yeah, it was time to go have a word with him. But the conversation doesn't go the way he thinks it will, at all. Rich Dad basically says, good, that anger you're feeling, that frustration, the feeling of being taken advantage of, that's the lesson. He tells him, look, life doesn't just talk to you, it shoves you, it pushes you around. And the whole point is to learn from those pushes to figure out how to push back. So now that he's got their attention, the real teaching starts. Rich Dad starts to break down this invisible trap that he sees almost everyone stuck in. And you've probably heard of it. He calls it the rat race. He explains that this is what most people do. It's the path Poor Dad was always talking about. You get a job, you work for your paycheck, but you never really stop to understand how money itself works. It's like spending your whole life on a hamster wheel. You're running and running and running, but you're not actually going anywhere. And what's so tricky about this cycle is that it feels totally normal. It feels safe. It's just the way things are done, right? Get up, go to work, pay your bills, do it all over again. It's a pattern that's so burned into our culture that most of us don't even think to question it. We just assume, hey, this is how it has to be. So why do people stay stuck? Rich Dad's explanation is pretty profound. He says, look, our lives with money aren't run by spreadsheets and logic. They're run by two really powerful, really basic emotions, fear and desire. So on one hand, you have fear. The fear of not being able to pay your bills, right? The fear of getting fired. That fear is what pushes you out the door every morning to go to work. But then the paycheck comes in. And that's when the second emotion kicks in. Desire. Suddenly you're thinking about all the cool stuff you can buy, a nicer car, a bigger house, that fancy vacation, and that's the trap. Fear makes you work, then desire makes you spend, which means you just have to keep working. So the big question is, how do you get out of it? Well, what Rich Dad does next is, it's even crazier than the first lesson. He's about to teach them something that's not just about money, it's about getting control of your own emotions and your own mind. Yeah, you heard that right. He tells them, okay guys, get back to work, but this time, I'm not paying you anything.
The whole point was to completely break that connection in their heads between work and getting a paycheck. He wanted to push their minds to start searching for opportunities to make money instead of just working for it.
But, just telling them isn't enough. Rich Dad has to put them to the test. He needs to see if they've really learned to control those emotions. So he dangles the one thing that gets everyone: more money. He wants to see if they have a price.
So he starts off by offering them $1 an hour. Now, you gotta remember, this is 1956. $1 an hour is an absolute fortune for a kid. You can just imagine their hearts are just pounding in their chests. But they stay quiet. They hold it together. They remember what this is all about. So he ups the ante, $2 an hour. I mean, that's enough to make them the richest kids in the entire neighborhood, probably. That little voice in your head screaming, "Say yes," must have been deafening. But again, they don't take the bait. And this is huge. They're actively choosing to think with their heads, not react with their emotions. And then he throws out this just ridiculous number, $5 an hour. And something really cool happens at this moment. The offer is so over the top that it's not even tempting anymore. The emotional pull just disappears. It's just a number, it's not a wage. And just like that, they've passed the test. They've mastered their desire. Okay, so now that their brains are free from that emotional cycle of just chasing a paycheck, they start to see the world in a whole new way. Suddenly, they're noticing things, opportunities that were right in front of them the whole time, but they just couldn't see them. And this is when they have their big aha moment. They're working in the store, and they notice the manager doing something strange. She's ripping the front covers off the comic books to send back to the distributor for credit. And the rest of the comic, the actual book, she's just tossing it in a box to be thrown away. Now, anybody else would just see a box of trash, but with their new way of thinking, they saw something completely different. They saw an asset that was being overlooked. I mean, this is the perfect example of the mindset shift. They figured out how to get these comics, which were literally trash, for free. Then they set up a little library in an empty room and started charging other kids 10 cents to come in and read for a couple of hours. They even hired Mike's sister to run it. And pretty soon they were pulling in $9.50 a week, way more than Rich Dad ever offered them. But here's the absolute key. The library was making the money even when they weren't there. It was a system. And right there, that was it. That was the first lesson, live and in person. They weren't working for money anymore. They had created something, an asset, that was making money for them. And that's really the whole point of this first lesson. The second they broke free from needing that paycheck, their whole perspective shifted. They weren't just looking for a job anymore. They were looking for opportunities. They went from thinking like an employee, trading their time for dollars, to thinking like an investor, someone who builds systems that generate money. And what Rich Dad taught them is that getting rich doesn't really start with the money in your pocket. It starts with a change in your mind. It's about how you see the world. So it leaves you with a pretty big question to ask yourself. Are you spending your life looking for a bigger paycheck? Or are you looking for the opportunity that everyone else is missing?